We're going to go back to Genesis. How many people were not in the Genesis class last quarter? Okay, I wasn't. I was teaching the class. So if you were teaching class, so you won't have gotten all this. But Waldron study is what we're doing, right? So the idea is to get the whole context of the Bible, including Christ in the Old Testament, right? As we're studying it, as we study together, and as we study with our kids and all of their classes as well. So Genesis 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They're really easy. Creation, Adam and Eve in the Bible, Adam and Eve. First sin, Cain and Abel. And then the generations between Adam and Eve and all the way to who? Noah, right? Noah's coming up next. So that's the first 5 chapters. They line up pretty well like that. 6 through 10, 6, 7, and 8, chapters 6, 7, and 8 of Genesis are about the flood. Either Noah's preparation for the flood or the flood itself. And that ends in chapter 9 where they're on dry land. And we get some very important new information from God to Noah in chapter 9. And it's important. Does anybody remember any of those things that were given? We've got some covenant information there. We've got new instructions. Give me an example. Anybody remember?
Be fruitful and multiply.
Okay, good. Be fruitful and multiply. He has said, go into all the earth and multiply. That is one of the plans of God for us. Can you think of any of the other things? Meat given for food. Up to this point, up until Genesis 9, what did the people eat? Plant life, right? Fruits, vegetables, plant life. In Genesis 9, we're told that now all animals are okay for eating. Was it going to be that way for the Israelites forever? No. But in that moment in time, all animals were fine for food. Some of these things in Genesis 9 I mentioned because you've got Mosaic law after this. And then you've got New Covenant. But some of these things carry through. Are all food okay for us now? I mean, all meat? Yeah, well, as far as I know, we can eat any meat we want. Is there anything we're not supposed to eat? From Genesis 9, blood. Leviticus, we talked about a number of times. Leviticus, I think 6, 7 area, Leviticus 9, a couple of different. Life is in the blood, right? That talks about that with the sacrifices. There's something special about the blood. What chapter that we studied a couple of quarters ago in Acts, does this come back up again? Anybody remember? The letters to the Gentiles with the council in Jerusalem in Acts 15, right? In Acts 15, they say, you know what? The old covenant is too hard for even our parents to do. We do not need to put this upon them. So let's tell them a few things, like don't fornicate, but don't eat things with the blood still in it. Life is in the blood, right? And so that started with Noah. Maybe it was before that as well. But at least with Noah, he's given that specific instruction. And then we have Mosaic law, which it's in there. But then also New Testament, it's in there as well. Was there something else? I'm looking for 2 other things there in Genesis 9. Great, the covenant of the rainbow. He's not going to destroy what? The earth with flood. Right? Does he say, I'm not going to destroy the earth with fire? No, I'm not going to destroy the earth with flood. I'm not speaking for God. I don't know that he might not have occasion to do something different. And my opinion is that's not the case. He's going to, eventually Christ's going to come, and those on earth are all going to meet those who've gone before in the sky, and then we're all going to be great, right? That's what Paul wrote. But who knows? I don't know that there couldn't be an interim and God could do something different. But the covenant in Acts 9 is I won't destroy the earth again by flood. And then there's one other thing, a curse on Canaan for some sin, right? Curse on Canaan. So those are the 4 things out of Genesis 9. And then the end of 9 has some more generations of Canaan, but Genesis 10 is the more generations of who? It goes from, what's that?
Noah.
From Noah to who? Abraham, all right? So we're going to, Abram at that time, thank you. So those are the generations in Acts 10. I keep saying Acts. I apologize for that. Genesis 10, generations. Genesis 11, Tower of Babel is built. God confuses their languages because they're disobeying something that Alan Moeller just said. What are they supposed to be doing? Going forth to all the earth, multiplying, going to the earth. They're not. They're all there together, building a tower, supposedly to heaven, and God says, okay, we're not going to do this. He confuses their languages, and now we have scattering of the people. In Genesis 12, who do we meet? Who's next? Abram, right? Genesis 12, all the way to Genesis 25, is all pretty much about Abraham. And in Genesis 12, we have another, the great covenant In Genesis 12, what do we call that? It's got some different names, some parts to it. His covenant with Abraham. What are some of the parts to the covenant with Abraham? The seed promise. In you, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. That's my favorite part, right? That's the part that affects us the most. It was a messianic promise. Somebody said something back here. Land, the land promise. They're going to have their own country, their own land, his people. By the way, all that starts with an if statement. I don't know if you remember that if you will leave your father's house and go to the land, if you will do this, then all of these things will come true for you and your family. It's not just this is going to happen for you. Abraham has some responsibilities too. The land promise, the seed promise, there was something else. You'll be a great nation. Thank you very much. And you'll be a great nation. So that's in chapter 12. 12 to 25 are all the stories of Abraham. And then we've got several chapters on Isaac, mostly Isaac, Jacob, a little bit on Esau, their relationships. And again, Abraham's still alive for a lot of that. And with Jacob, we eventually have sons of Jacob, we're going to talk about later on. But one of the sons of Jacob was Joseph. And so in I'll get it in a minute. Genesis 37 to the end of the book is all about the stories of Joseph. Okay? So he had brothers, sold him into slavery. Does everybody know these? I don't only know them in one order. You may know them in different. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, right? Why is that important? Who cares? That's the 12 tribes. Well, Joseph splits into 2 tribes, right, eventually, Ephraim and Manasseh, right? And so that's where we've been talking about Leviticus with Ben. All these priests come from the tribe of Levi. We're going to talk in Numbers when we get there about how everyone's aligned in their camps. It's all by the tribe. So these families, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, all of these, they come back over and over and over again, all the way as far as Jewish documents continue to exist. That's why these genealogies and these generations are important, all leading to Christ and his lineage, which was from which family? Judah, right, okay. So that is the end of Genesis. They are happy. They are living in a place with food that Joseph has prepared during a famine, and they are pretty well taken care of. Then Exodus starts, and we find Israel in bondage. We talk about Moses' birth. He's raised as a son of Pharaoh's daughter, and that's in the first couple of chapters, not very long. Then he's rejected by his people and flees to the wilderness at what age? Age 40. He leaves, and he stays away for how long? 40 years. So he leaves at age 40, and then at about 80 years old, he meets God in the burning bush. And God tells him he's going to go back to Egypt. I don't know this chapter, right? I think it's like around chapter 5 or so. It's still very early in Exodus, because he comes back with the plagues in chapter 7. All right? So chapter 7 begins the plagues. Let my people go. There's a couple of things with the staff beforehand, but it goes right into the water turning to blood pretty quickly. And Moses again rejects him. Do you know him? You want to say him? Water to blood, frogs, lice, flies, disease of cattle, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, death of the firstborn, right? Okay. Does it matter? I don't know. But it's horrifying to think of these things. It all culminates with the Egyptians pretty much begging them to leave. What were God's words about that? What did he say they did to the Egyptians? They plundered the Egyptians. Okay? And so as they're leaving, and Ben made a good point of trying to list these places. They start out leaving Ramesses, okay? They go through Succoth and down to Etham. I always get that one wrong. Elim is coming up next. Etham, and then they cross the Red Sea on dry land with the Egyptian army destroyed in their wake. And they land in chapter 15 in Marah. Remember bitter water in Marah? With Moses' big song. The whole chapter is pretty much his song. And Miriam ends it. And it's a joyful song, praising God. And I don't know the tune, right? But I am sure they all sung this song. And so that's 15, chapter 15. 16 through 18, they continue on their travels all the way to Mount Sinai. So they go down through, what was after that? You got Mara, and then Elam, and then the wilderness of, Sin. What? So that all the misdeeds are in that wilderness? No? What? Why? What's the relationship of the word? Anybody remember? You remember Sinai, right? Looks like sin, Sinai. You might say the wilderness of Sin. It's the wilderness of sin. It's talking about the wilderness related to Sinai being right there. And then they get into Rephidim, and then eventually Mount Sinai, where they're going to spend some time. How long do they spend at Mount Sinai? A year. They spend a year, all right? And at Mount Sinai, a lot of amazing things happen. So 19 to 24, that's the story of the covenant with God. It was a covenant with Abraham, right? And the people, yes, because they were Abraham's descendants. But that 19 to 24, when all the people said, we will do this. We will obey. The blood is sprinkled on them, and they are now part of this covenant willingly, audibly. They have taken part in it. 25 through 30, kind of as an aside, talks about all the stuff that they need to build, the tabernacle that they're going to build, the furniture items, you might say, they're going to build, the garb of the priest that he's going to wear, that they're going to wear. It goes into great detail in those 5 chapters. And then in chapter 31, you've got 2 guys that are sort of in charge, that have been given the ability to know about how to do these things. You remember their names? I never pronounce one of them right, even though I've looked at it. Aholiab, I think, is how you say one of them. The other one starts with a B. You have it in front of you? What's Bezalel? Your guess is as good as mine. I've heard it done a bunch of different times. And don't do this. This is the way my brain works wrong. I always think Beelzebub. Well, that's not it. That's wrong, right? But it's like Bezalel or Beelzebub, something along that line. And so then 32 through 34, they break the covenant. It's when we have the story of breaking the covenant. And God basically says, I'm going to start over. Moses, you're the man. I'm going to start over with you. I'm wiping everybody out. And Moses basically says, look, if you're going to wipe them out, wipe me out too. I'm done. And I can't do this. And God reconciles with the people and renews that covenant. And then in chapters 35 to 40, all the way through the end of Acts, 35 to 40 of Exodus, 35 to 40 is, okay, they built the tabernacle. Not just they heard about it, how to do it. They built it. They collected what they needed and built it. They collected what they needed to build the ark, right? The ark, one of those. There's something else I'm missing. The Ark of the Covenant. What was the other? There's another piece of furniture, you might say, in addition to the priestly garbs. All of those things that God said to build, over and over and over, especially in Acts 40, it says, and they did it exactly how God commanded them. I think it's in there like 13 times. Exactly. They did this exactly how God commanded them. And that's the end of Exodus. Is it the end of Mount Sinai? No, they're still on Mount Sinai. Numbers is going to begin on Mount Sinai with some very specific instructions about traveling, mostly, dividing up themselves. Why do they call it Numbers? We're going to have to count all the families. They're going to count all the people. So the census is taken of sorts. Numbers, that makes sense. And then I have a little point here. I think it is Numbers 8. Let's look at this. Numbers 10. If you go to Numbers 10, look at verse 33. And we're skipping way, way, way ahead. Okay, we're going to come to this later on. Numbers 10, verse 33. Thus they set out from the mount of the Lord 3 days' journey with the ark of the covenant of the Lord, journeying in front of them for 3 days to seek out a resting place for them. Everything but when they crossed over the Red Sea on dry land and traveled that 16, 17, 18, chapter 16, 17, 18, got to Mount Sinai, to that point. So the whole book of Leviticus, right? Mount Sinai. All these instructions they received, Mount Sinai. The whole law, Mosaic law, A lot of that's repeated even in Deuteronomy, right? The Ten Commandments, Exodus 20, that's part of the law. All of that took place in 1 year. Now, we talked about Genesis up to Abraham, right? We said it was chapter 12, right? That was 2,000 years. 2,000 years. Those chapters of Genesis to Abraham. Abraham to Christ, about 2,000 years, okay? 2,000. All of the stuff we've been studying in this quarter that Ben has been going through, 1 year, and the most important thing that ever happened to the Jews, the Israelites, maybe the world, until Christ nailed Mosaic law to the cross. Okay? That's, for all the hundreds of years after this was the law that they were under, the law that they were subject to. This was what God wanted them to do and obey. And so I just think that's interesting in that scope of things to think about this time that passes, because I'm always concerned about time passing, right? Okay. So we're going to go into two other things, but does anybody have something they want to say, like a minute or two? I can take here if you've got it.
On that point of how long of a time that is when we get into the New Testament and the Gospel accounts, it makes so much more sense when it's so hard for them to turn away from the old law, especially after, 800 years of silence?
Yeah.
That's something we have to keep in mind, too. We want to look at it, they're so stupid, but that's what they've known for literally
thousands of years, right? Hundreds and hundreds of years. Over 1,000 years. Exactly right. And I did look it up. I don't remember. I want to say it was like 1,500 years, but I don't remember that part. What we look up the other night was 422 years and 10 days. It was very specific between one date and the flood, but I don't remember what it was. We're silly. We like doing that. Yes?
Going along with what you were saying about it's interesting to me that God thinks and handles things very differently than probably we would have done. And in His Word, like say, first 12 chapters of Genesis covers about 2,000 years. But then there are chapters and chapters in Leviticus just describing garments and vessels.
Yes.
And things like that we
Chapters that took hours to put down, not even days, right? There was something you were saying along that line. Judges, it'll just say, and he judged for 70 years. It'll be a paragraph about this big, and 70 years went by, right? That's not what this time period is. It is the most important time period that existed for them until Christ, right? Okay, so that year was a big deal. Let's look over at Numbers. We're going to skip ahead a little bit and come back to some things. We talked about this in Leviticus. You've got the Levites, okay? You've got roles that they have. But who are the priests that can come in toward the inner areas of the the tabernacle? Somebody got to speak up. I'm sorry.
high priest.
The high priests. Okay. So who makes up these high priests? Aaron's sons, right? Aaron's family. Well, what's the matter with Moses' family? Did Moses have sons? Moses is Aaron's family, but he's not Aaron's sons, right? Aaron's sons get to do these things. Let's go over to Numbers 3. We're not going to go back to the Leviticus area, but now these are the records of the generations of Aaron and Moses. This is verse 1. At the time when the Lord spoke with Moses on Mount Sinai, these then are the names of the sons of Aaron: Nadab the firstborn, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. These are the names of the sons of Aaron, the anointed priests whom he ordained to serve as priests. But Nadab, as we studied, Nadab and Abihu died before the Lord when they offered strange fire before the Lord in the wilderness of Sinai. They had no children. So Eleazar and Ithamar served as priests in the lifetime of their father Aaron. Okay, let's look over at Exodus 6 together. Exodus 6:16. We're going to read a few verses there, 16 through 20. Exodus 6:16 through 20. These are the names of the sons of Levi according to their generations: Gershon and Kohath, and Merari, and the length of Levi's life was 137 years. The sons of Gershon, Libni and Shimei, I think I'm saying that right, according to their families. The sons of Kohath, Amram and Ishar, and Hebron and Uzziel, and the length of Kohath's life was 133 years. The sons of Merari, Mali and Mushi, and these are the families of the Levites according to their generations. Amram married his father's sister Jochebed, and she bore him Aaron and Moses, and the length of Amram's life was 137 years. So what tribe was Aaron and Moses from? Levi. And what specific family was he from? Well, who was his dad? Amram, Kohath, right? Amram, dad, family of Kohath. And when we get over into Numbers, that's going to be more and more important because they start breaking these families, the Levites, up into smaller and smaller groups. So it's good to remember that they were part of Kohath, part of the Amram family, okay? Now, look over at Exodus 18, 3 and 4. Let's go 2 to 4. Exodus 18, 2 to 4. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife Zipporah after he sent her away, and her 2 sons, of whom one was named Gershom, for Moses said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. The other was named Eleazar. I say it that way because Aaron had a son, Eleazar. Same exact spelling, except the last vowel is an E here instead of an A. For he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. So they kind of repeat what these names mean here. So Gershom was one son, and Eleazar was the other one. So now let's go over to 1 Chronicles 23. 1 Chronicles 23. And we'll go down to about verse 13. 13, if I can do this right. The sons of Amram were Aaron and Moses, and Aaron was set apart to sanctify him as most holy, he and his sons forever, to burn incense before the Lord, to minister to him, and to bless in his name forever. But as for Moses, the man of God, his sons were named among the tribe of Levi. The sons of Moses were Gershom and Eleazar. The son of Gershom was Shebuel the chief. The son of Eleazar was Rehabiah the chief. And Eleazar had no other sons, but the sons of Rehabiah were very many. Okay, now, so what does it mean? They were numbered among the tribe of Levi. Excuse me. They still had tasks. And we're going to get into that. And Ben spent a little bit of time on that. They still have tasks. They just weren't among the high priests. Isn't that interesting? I think it is. And I hadn't looked at it before until I started going through Numbers a little bit. And so I figured there's really no need to maybe teach the middle schoolers that if you're doing middle school class and with the teachers preparing, then we'll just talk about it here as a little bit of an in-depth look. Does anybody have any questions about that before we move on to the next sort of subtopic? Yes, sir.
Laid out all of the tasks for the various tribes to do. There was never any indication that I saw at all that one task was more important than another.
You're absolutely right. There were some tasks that brought you closer to God, and you would die if you did them. But for the most part, that was everybody else other than the high priests. Yeah, there wasn't any that I saw a priority level of this is more important than this. You're exactly right. Anything else? Yeah.
And it's interesting because you think about Aaron, what he did with the golden calf, it's still fascinating and he's still kind of included, but the only distinction between Moses and Aaron that I can see it that might point toward this is when Moses was initially called by God and he kept making excuses for why he didn't want to do it, and then God brought Aaron in to be his spokesperson. It's just, I wonder if that's maybe something to do with why Aaron ended up being the person that
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe so. Maybe so. Anybody else? Okay. Turn over with me to Numbers 6. The end of Leviticus covers, I think the last chapter of Leviticus, covers some vows. Okay, some vows. And so Ben touched on this chapter number 6, the Nazarite vow, when he was going through it. But I don't know if you remember, the pages were going so fast, he had no time really to spend on it. And I thought it might be useful to go through some of this. Partly because we've been talking about all these sacrifices. So I'm going to talk about the specifics of being a Nazarite in a moment. But I think we've got time. We've got time. We'll do this in a little different way. Okay. So there are a number of qualifications, a number of steps, you might say, to taking this Nazarite vow. All right? And they're basically outlined verse 3, verse 5, verse 6. And so in verse 2, though, it says, when a man or a woman makes a special vow, the vow of the Nazarite. So is it only men? No, man or woman. It says it really clearly here. Man or a woman. They're going to dedicate themselves to the Lord. He shall abstain from wine and strong drink. He shall drink no vinegar. Oh, by the way, here's a good example. Clancy, this one's for you. You notice it says a man or woman, and it says he after it, right? Because that used to be very much a inclusive word for all of humanity. And so it is different, and I'll pick on you because you can take it. All right. So, he shall abstain from wine and strong drink. He or she shall drink no vinegar, whether made from wine or strong drink, nor shall he drink any grape juice, nor eat any fresh or dried grapes. All the days of his separation, he shall not eat anything that is produced by the grapevine, from the seeds even to the skin. Now, it repeats something there. Verse 5, all the days of his vow of separation, and then it goes on. How long were you a Nazarite for when you took a vow? Yeah, tell you, it was for a specific point in time that you chose. You said, I'm going to make this vow for a period of time. Do we know some folks that seemed like they were destined to be a Nazarite from birth? Yeah? Name one. Yeah, it's because I did this. You go, oh, Matt, you look like, just like Samson, right? Samson was one that we know. Were there others potentially in the Bible? Great, okay, I like that. And we're going to come back to that in a second. Doesn't actually say he was a Nazarite, okay, but it does talk about his hair, it talks about his clothing a little bit. Actually, there's a little parallel verse. In fact, if you looked at, I don't know that we have time to turn there, but 2 Kings 1:8 talk about Elijah, and some of what I think it was Mark, a quote he said about about John the Baptist being hairy and wearing a belt. The way that that's done, it almost mimics what was said about Elijah at one point about him wearing a camel's coat, camel's fur, and wearing a certain belt. So it's kind of interesting because that's who Christ said was, Elijah was John the Baptist, right? And so maybe he was a Nazarite. Doesn't exactly say it, but again, not cutting the hair, maybe being hairy. Closest thing in the New Testament that I know about. You're exactly right. Yes. Yes, maybe took a vow. In fact, that is in Acts. I didn't put it down here. I should know that one. But what's that?
21.
Acts 21. He took a vow, and along with some other seemingly younger men, and sponsored them, and took them in to have their sacrifices to pay their offering. It doesn't say it was a Nazarite vow. It could have been, and a little bit different because often the purification we're going to get here was you shaved your head at the end of the vow, and it looked like maybe Paul shaved his head earlier than that before he got there, but I don't know. It was definitely did take a vow. But maybe Samuel was the other one I was thinking of, because Hannah made some promises to God. If we want to go over there real quick, 1 Samuel 1. 1 Samuel 1. It's before the 2nd Samuel, if you're having a hard time finding it. All right. 1 Samuel 1. Look at verse 11. She made a vow and said, O Lord of hosts, if you will indeed look on the affliction of your maidservant, and remember me, and not forget your maidservant, but will give your maidservant a son, then I will give him to the Lord all the days of his life, and a razor shall never come upon his head. Okay? That's what we're getting ready to see here, verse 5 of chapter 6 in Numbers 6, verse 5. All the days of his vow of separation, no razor shall pass over his head. He shall be holy until the days are fulfilled for which he separated himself to the Lord, and he shall let the locks of his hair on his head grow long. All the days of his separation of the Lord, he shall not go near a dead person. That's verse 6. Well, what if he does go near a dead person? What happens? So those are basically the three qualifications, but starting in verse 9, it gives some things. Well, here's what happens. If you go near a dead person, wasn't your fault. He died. He died right next to you. What do you do? The guy died next to you, or, it's not his fault that he didn't go looking for a dead person. Well, here's what you do. Your vow is temporarily on hold, essentially. And then you have to go make sacrifices, purify yourself for a period of time, and then you can continue the vow. And in fact, after the priest in verse 11 has offered the sin offering and consecrated his head, let's see. Look at the end of verse 12. But the former days of the vow will be void because his separation was defiled. All right? So it's not, I said that wrong. It wasn't even put on hold. He's got to start over. Okay? So that's kind of interesting, I think. But what I really wanted to get out of this, I think 5 minutes is enough time. Let's look, starting at verse 13 of chapter 6. Think about all these sacrifices we talk about. I think in Leviticus, we think they're all separate. Oh, they had to go into town and do this sacrifice. Or they went and they took this animal for this sacrifice. Listen to how these sacrifices are all kind of jumbled up here together in the same event of them. This person is completing their vow, and now they're ending their time of separation. Verse 13. Now this is the law of the Nazarite. When the days of his separation are fulfilled, he shall bring the offering to the doorway of the tent of meeting. He shall present his offering to the Lord, one male lamb and a year old, without defect for a burnt offering, and one ewe lamb a year old without defect for a sin offering, and one ram without a defect for a peace offering, and a basket of unleavened cakes of fine flour mixed with oil, and unleavened wafers spread with oil, along with their grain offering and their drink offering. Then the priest shall present them before the Lord and shall offer his sin offering and his burnt offering. See what I'm saying? This is all happening at the same time. Different reasons, different offering, different sacrifice that is being brought to God, but they are happening all in this very close together. Verse 17, he shall also offer the ram for a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord, together with a basket of unleavened cakes. The priest shall likewise offer its grain offering and its drink offering. Then the Nazarite, this is verse 18, shall shave his dedicated head of hair at the doorway of the tent of meeting, and take the dedicated hair of his head and put it on the fire, which is under the sacrifice of peace offerings. So now he is reconciled. He's at peace with God. The time of his vow is over. Her vow is over. And then there's some more, verse 19 to 21, about some extra sacrifices. And we're probably not going to spend time on it, but number 6, 22 to 26 is one of the kind of the prettiest, I think, couple of verses in the Bible. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to Aaron and to his sons, saying, thus you shall bless the sons of Israel. You shall say to them, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Okay, so I got 1 minute, 2 minutes. You got anything? Judy? No? Okay.
Why did they do it? Why did they do it?
I don't know. Since it was a separation, I feel like they were giving up something. Maybe there was a reason in their life. But with Samson, God set him aside. With Samuel, his mom sort of set him aside. I don't know. Did you have an idea? I don't know why Paul made a vow.
Except it shows a point of dedication in your life that you're going to do something. And you're going to stick with it and be even unusual in your doing of this. And you're going to live this way for X number of time, years or days or whatever he chooses.
Yeah. And over, it's called a separation. So clearly, they're going to be different than the rest of society.
Devotion to God,
Yeah.
showing dedication.
Exactly right.
Physical proof. I'm not just saying that's how I am.
Yeah,
Look what I did.
I'm demonstrating it.
Think of the unit.
Yeah, exactly right. David. Thanks, Ron.
When you think about the extremely intricate details of all these regulations, procedures, why, when, and how, and so forth and all, it reminds me of Hebrews 9, which talks about that somewhat. It says, the way into the most holy place had not been fully done, but when Christ came,
Yeah. Well, it goes back to me to when we look at Noah there in Genesis 9 having some specific things. This whole thing with the Israelites and the new law, Mosaic law, so specific. Yes, it is about holiness, definitely. Yes, it is about religion, praising God, worshiping God. Yes, no doubt. It's also completely intertwined with every social thing they have, every political thing they have, every governance thing they have. All of that designed from scratch for these people by God. And you couldn't separate it. There was no separating the holy, the worship from the governance, from the how do we rule. That's what God put together for them. Did I miss somebody back there? No? Okay. Hey, thanks y'all for your attention.